The Memorial Cup's officially canceled. NHL trade deadline's come and gone. Dan Shulman interview, voice of the Toronto Blue Jays on Sportsnet. It's Sports QuaranTV now. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Sports QuaranTV. Chris Dobson, Gerry Green, joining from the Mirror Machine. Gerry, we've got a lot to talk about. We've got a great show lined up. Most exciting, we have a special guest, which we have an interview we shot earlier this week with the voice of the Toronto Blue Jays on Sportsnet, Dan Shulman. The Jays off to a great start. But before we get into any of that conversation, we're going to start with the number one topic, as we've been talking about for months. The CHL Memorial Cup has been officially canceled. No surprise on either one of our ends, I would assume, unless you've changed your tune.
No, what else could they do, Chris? I mean, the OHL and the Junior A League, a huge Junior A League in Ontario, they haven't dropped a puck, and here we are in the middle of April. So what were they to do? They had no other choice. The interesting thing is, who gets awarded if it gets to be vied for next year. It's going to be the Q's turn. Do you bypass the other two that had the opportunity and because of COVID never did? But I don't think it's not a huge surprise, Chris. And I think they were waiting to the very last minute when everything was impossible to put together. At no time, it was interesting, though, do they mention the major sponsor who got on board after MasterCard was vying out. But still, I see how that now that I see what the dates were supposed to be, that they thought they might be. I see how the Q has situated their dates that were going to jive just in case it worked out. But we knew it was never going to work out, Chris. It was just too hard in some places in Canada to get hockey on the ice.
Look, I mean, I think I speak gladly on behalf of both of us. I mean, nothing would have made us happier than to see a Memorial Cup this year. I mean, we didn't get one last year. We didn't get this one to get the one this year. But to kind of go back and talk about, your thoughts on where it should be next year, because they've missed 2 consecutive years, you might as well just go to the QMJHL, give it to the team who's next in line, and then start that cycle over again. I mean, it's at a point now where, you don't want to go back from where it was supposed to go last year and then this year, and then all of a sudden everybody's delayed 2 or 3 years, because that changes the rebuild process. And that's not fair to the teams who have spent, the trades and the assets to build their teams for 2 years out from now. So overall, yeah, I would think you'd have to go back to the QMJHL, but that's why I am not in charge of the Canadian Hockey League. But at this point, interesting to note here too, is that like out of the 3 leagues, yes, the WHL got off the ground, not that long ago. They're getting some games and everything's great. But the QMJHL has been playing, for the most part, all season long. And I mean, it's a shortened season for them. But the interesting side of things is that, there was supposed to be a bubble opening here in Atlantic Canada on the 19th of April. Well, that has now been delayed. They're shooting for the 3rd of May now. So now it looks like, those teams won't be playing the other teams from Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island. So I would think that after this Sunday, there's no schedule released yet. So we don't have that information as we are recording this. But what does that do? I mean, with the cases that were climbing in Quebec and now everything that's happening here in Atlantic Canada, is it not time to potentially look at shutting the whole thing down?
The Quebec portion of the league, the 12 teams over there, have a date set for next Friday and the 23rd of April. And that seems quite pie in the sky as far as I'm concerned. I just read, Gatineau had 24 cases of both players and staff that have been infected. Quebec, same thing. 2 major centers, Quebec and Gatineau just across the water from Ottawa. And then you have the problems in Blainville, just a couple of cases there. But again, Boisbriand is just a suburb of Montreal. So those are the 3 major centers in Quebec that are having some issues. And I just think it's a little bit of pie in the sky for them. Here in the Maritimes, if you get another 2 weeks of Bathurst, St. John, and Moncton, I have no problem with that. I think you might get another 5 games in the next 2 weeks, and I think the competition is really good. I feel a little bit for Charlottetown, who got into trouble with Halifax last night, where tempers boiled over and they had a major brouhaha, if you want to use that term, and how, challenged maybe they aren't playing Halifax and Cape Breton in the last few weeks. I think it's now 27 or 28 games that they've played against them now, Chris, and that must be very, very trying. I think Moncton, on this end of the scale, really puts up a good battle against Bathurst and and St. John and Bathurst both have to be on their toes when they take on the Wildcats. And now the huge rivalry between St. John and Bathurst has really solidified, and they both have won 4 times since the return. It's becoming more intense.
Well, I remember you were up there. You were calling that St. John Bathurst game, I believe, on the radio. And, it's good to see Ryan Francis break out of that bit. I'm not going to say slump, but I mean, he wasn't the guy that we had seen when they had first made the acquisition to acquire him. But, tying a franchise record with 6 points in a game, 3 goals, 3 assists. Peter Reynolds had a hat trick as well. I think you said it's the first time you've seen 2 teammates score a hat trick together, I think, in a long time, isn't it?
I've never seen it, Chris. And the interesting stat I threw out last night in the game was, Francis's first game as a Sea Dog was in Bathurst. He scored 4, and now he had 7. He got 3 the other night and set a team record with 3 goals and 3 assists, by the way. And there's a lot of great players that have gone through St. John and now play in the NHL. So that's quite a hat to be put on him. And number 2, I think he only has 12 goals on the year. So he's had 7 of them in just 2 games. And so those other games, he's only had 5, but he's always been a factor. And it was certainly unique to see 2 teammates, 2 line mates score 3 goals each in a hockey game. To get back to the Memorial Cup, Chris, you know how teams plan to formulate their team when they get awarded a Memorial Cup. Well, let's say if it does get awarded to the Q, you've got a short timetable to put a team together that is worthy of hosting. And then you, of course, want to host a team that would be worthy of hosting a national tournament, because I don't think the hosts like to be embarrassed, and they try to win their league not only and get in the front door rather than the back.
Look, I think if we are to see one in the QMJHL, I do not think there'll be any surprise at all. I mean, Trevor Georgie's made sure that it's not been a secret. He is going to bid for it. He is doing everything he can. Hopefully we can see our hands on one. But again, when you're going through this process, you have to submit what a potential roster is going to look like to the league, to the committee, because it's a voting process. You have to show them what the events are going to look like around the city. How are they going to accommodate? What's the hotel locations like, and how far is it from the rink? How many practice surfaces are there? So yeah, there's a lot of things to go into and a lot of factor into when they make that decision. But again, where it's been 2 years out now, they have to look at it. I mean, now if you're the QMJHL, I think you have to. I mean, it sounds like the vaccination rollout's happening quite smoothly. I would think by next season, we should probably be able to have fans fully in the buildings again. And, hopefully life starts to get back to normal a little bit. But overall, I don't know how it's all going to play out. But yeah, I would think that at this point you bypass it. But you're right. I'll be curious to see what kind of team and who's going to bid for it. But I would suggest that St. John will be right there in the mix if it's an option.
Yeah, and I think the Q is going to get back of our current subject of the bubble being burst or not being inflated, I guess, for this Monday, and they've now made it May 3rd. I'm not surprised. I'm not shocked. I'm disappointed, but I'm not surprised. But that the 6 teams still continue to play and 6 teams have been healthy. I'm still happy about that. But I think the Q's still going to have to reshuffle a little bit, Chris, because I don't think that other half is going to, the other 2/3 of the league is going to get rolling by next Friday.
No, you're absolutely right. And the last thing I want to talk about the Q before we move on is, you talked about rivalries high and well. Well, the Charlottetown Islanders and the Halifax Mooseheads rivalry starting to boil over on numerous occasions. Zach LaRue picking up his 4th suspension of the season. Yeah. It looked like in total, I think there was like 7, maybe 8 suspensions handed out for that for the line brawl that took place, and Alexei Gravel was in there as well. Those are the things I'm going to miss because I love these rivalries, but having to play these guys 13, 14 times is just getting a bit insane.
Yeah, you knew it was going to boil over, and he seems like a frustrating young man. Frustrated indeed.
Absolutely. So, we teased it off the top, and we were very excited. I did have a chance to have a chat with Dan Shulman, the voice of the Toronto Blue Jays on Sportsnet. We're very excited. I hope you guys enjoy it. We'll see you after. Thank you so much for taking time to do this. I know it's been a very exciting 2 weeks so far in the season. Jays are looking great, so thanks for taking time, my friend.
My pleasure, Chris. Hope you're doing well.
Absolutely. So I'm going to get you right into it right out of the gate. We're now into year 2 of the Jays not playing in the home city of Toronto. Do you think people underestimate how difficult that is for a team?
Yeah, I do. I think it can be difficult for the teams that are playing them too, because Major League ball players don't expect to be going to Buffalo and Dunedin to be playing games. But I think for the Blue Jays, and listen, within the grand scheme of a pandemic, this is a tiny speck of a problem. But if we're just talking about professional sports, I do think it's an issue. Although the team has done everything they can do to make the facilities the best that they can, it's not like playing in Toronto. It's not like playing in front of fans. It's not like having your normal big clubhouse and everything that you're used to having at the major league level. So I hope it's something that they dealt with it beautifully last year. This is a longer season, so we'll see how they deal with it over 6 months. But I think they've got a good culture and good leadership, and hopefully they'll be able to deal with it fine.
Now, albeit I do know we're only 2 weeks in here, but, right off the hop, you've had a chance to watch Vladdy over the last couple of years. And, 2 weeks in, Vladdy's making a case for himself to possibly look like an MVP candidate. I mean, other than dropping the weight, what changes have you seen him make?
Well, the weight is definitely part of it. I also think there's an accountability, a maturity. He owned up to not being the best that he can be last year, and he apologized to his teammates, even though they said they didn't think he needed to do that. And I think he understands that he owes it not just to himself, but to his teammates to be the best that he can be. So losing the weight is great. I think there's been a real, newfound maturity in his at-bats. He's taking close pitches. He's fouling off tough pitches, not trying to do too much with them. Fouling off a tough pitch and waiting for them to make a mistake. Listen, he's not going to hit 360 with a 540 on base percentage all season, but he has definitely taken a big step forward. And it's exciting because it's exciting to see what the numbers will be at the end of the season. I think he looks better at first base as well. I think it's everything: work ethic, maturity, accountability, being a good teammate. I think he's made big strides in all of those areas.
I'm glad you brought up the first base piece, because a lot of the question marks surrounding him would have been his agility as well. And we've already seen firsthand how agile he can be making those stretch plays over at first. And he doesn't look out of place at all.
No, it's funny because he's still a big guy, right? Like he's 240 pounds or somewhere around there. And, I've talked to him. I've stood face to face. I'm about 6'3.5". They list him at 6'2". He's not 6'2". I think he might. I'll give him 6'1", like 6'1", 240. That's a big guy still. But it's funny, for a guy his size, he is agile. He is athletic. He does have a lot of things going for him. And I think he's done a nice job. There's still some things he has to learn. Sometimes, do you stretch too early and get yourself in a problem? Sometimes do you stay in your stretch instead of coming off the bag and just making sure the ball doesn't get by you when you don't have a chance to get the out? And these are things that he'll learn. There are a lot of things to learn at first base, but I think he's done a nice job. And I'm not sure he's ever going to be Keith Hernandez or Don Mattingly over at first base, but if he can become an average first baseman, if you can just keep him in the field, then I think that's a great thing for everybody.
So coming into the season, take the offense out of it. Well, let's talk about the rotation. There was some concern about the pitching staff after Ryu. 2 weeks in, do you share the same concern? There's also do you share that same concern?
I think there have been some, positive things and some concerns. On a positive front, Robbie Ray looked very good in his first start last night. Steven Matz has looked great, just great, since through the spring and in his first two starts. So with Ryu, Matz, and Ray, you want to believe you've got three solid guys. On the negative side, Nate Pearson's hurt. Thomas Hatch is hurt. Tyler Yates never pitched. Tommy John, he's out for the season. So those are three quality arms they were counting on, and right now one's gone and the other two haven't pitched yet. So that's a concern, because then you're putting guys like TJ Zoik and Ross Stripling maybe in different roles than they were intended to be in. Tanner Roark made one start. It didn't go well. He's in the bullpen right now. They've got a lot of depth, but the back end of the rotation to me is still a bit of a concern. Maybe Anthony Kay gets elevated at some point. Hopefully Nate Pearson gets healthy at some point. I think they'll figure it out. And if they can hang around in the race until July, I believe they'll make a trade for a pitcher. So not to, straddle the fence here, but there have been some good signs and there are some concerns. And their pitching doesn't have to be great, but it's got to be decent. And it's got a chance to be, but they're going to need some guys to get healthy, and they're going to need guys like Stripling and Zoik and maybe Kay, Trent Thornton, whatever roles these guys are in. They're going to need them to be reasonably good.
I'm glad you brought up Nate Pearson, because Jays fans haven't really been able to see a healthy Nate Pearson for a long stretch of time. How good can a healthy Nate Pearson be?
I think he can be great, but I think the jury's still out to a certain extent because of how little he's pitched. He's only thrown like 140 innings as a professional, minor leagues and major leagues put together. I think he can be really, really good. I'm not one of these guys who says he's like an absolute lock to be a number one and a star and a future Cy Young Award winner. I don't think we know that yet. And I'm not saying he can't. I just don't know that we can say for certain that he can. He's got 2+ pitches, fastball, slider. We know that. The changeup and the curveball, I think, are works in progress. First of all, they got to get him healthy because that's been a problem. And then let's see him have some success at the major league level. Let's get see if his confidence improves and his command improves. And if and when I assume he comes back, when he comes back this year, it'll be interesting to see what kind of a role he's in. Again, he barely pitched last year. They're not going to let him throw 140, 150 innings, I don't believe. So does he come back as a multi-inning reliever? Does he come back as a piggyback guy, sharing a game with another starter? I'm not sure. I think he's got a really, really high ceiling, but I think we've got to kind of wait and see what happens once he gets healthy.
Of course. And I mean, speaking of the injury bug too, we can't rule out the fact that one of the main storylines out of Toronto, of course, is, Jays fans have yet to see a healthy George Springer in the lineup. But I mean, when George is healthy, I mean, he was close to prepping his comeback there, finally getting a start, but obviously something set back there. But, they're going to have 4 outfielders for 3 positions. How do you see that working itself out?
I'm not one who gets, I've never been all that concerned about that, to be honest with you, because between injuries and slumps and bad matchups, I think it's easier to find a guy to sit out on a given day. Some people at the beginning of the year, it was like, hey, it's going to be Randall Grichuk. Well, Randall Grichuk's been their second best hitter so far this year. Rowdy Tellez obviously is off to a slow start. That's a concern. But one of the outfielders can DH and Rowdy Tellez can sit out. Or they can sit out one of the outfielders, or if they're comfortable putting Vladdy over at third, Biggio can sit, or Biggio can go to second and Simeon can get a day off, that sort of thing. They've got versatility, but there's an old saying in baseball, unfortunately, these things have a way of working themselves out, meaning how often is it that all 10 guys are going to be healthy and swinging the bat well at one time? So it's a little bit of an issue, but they're going to want to get guys off their feet every now and again. And if the worst problem they have is 4 good outfielders for 3 spots or 10 good players for 9 spots, those are good problems to have. You want competition. You want guys fighting their way into the lineup. And I actually don't think it'll be much of an issue for them this year.
Well, speaking of Rowdy Tellez this week, really, it's almost like I gave you these questions before we started because you're segueing right into where I want to go. And that is basically, this week, controversial strike call to end a ball game this week. Rowdy Tellez happened to be the guy at the plate. There's been a lot of talk online in regards to bringing robot umpires at home plate. How do you feel about that? I mean, is it just rumbling or is it something you think we could honestly see here in Major League Baseball?
I think you could eventually see it. I mean, they're experimenting with it in the low minors right now, or last year, or 2 years ago, I should say. And again, this year, they're going to experiment with it in the low minors. I don't know anything about how awesome it is or awesome it's not. Like, is it 100% foolproof? If you watch a lot of these A-ball level games with a robot are you walking out of there saying, okay, that's good, that they didn't miss a pitch? I don't know the technology. I remember seeing one pitch from a couple of years ago where I think the ball almost bounced or literally bounced and it was called a strike. They've got to make sure it's really, really, really good, as close to perfect as can be. And even something like how quickly does the home plate umpire hear it, make the signal to keep the game moving. So I am definitely in favor of learning more about it and seeing if it passes the eye test and seeing if the people in charge, and that, to me, that includes players and coaches and managers, pitchers and hitters, like not just a committee of 8 people who maybe have never played the game. If everybody signs off on it and says, yeah, that works, that's really good, then I'm all in. But I don't know if we know enough yet to know how foolproof and how perfect it can be.
I mean, at the same time, I do understand both sides of the coin here. I understand you don't want to take away the human aspect of the game, but there are certain situations where you have to get the call right. I mean, we're early into the season and there's been multiple situations where umpires are under scrutiny for, potential missed calls. And so, I mean, from a balls and strikes perspective, I do see it. I mean, if it's right, and it's what's done, but it's going to determine the outcome of a game. I think you have to get it right.
Yeah. And listen, the Chapman pitch was coming in at 101 miles an hour. It was definitely a ball. I mean, it was 3-4 inches low, but I've always thought, like, put yourself in the position of a home plate umpire. To me, it always seemed like it was easier to call inside and outside. You can see the edges of the plate. As you're leaning over the top of a catcher, can you really tell if a ball is that far off the ground or is that far off the ground? To me, that's a lot harder. This is a hard job. And I don't think anybody should expect umpires to be perfect. it's a big change to contemplate because it's been the way that it's been for 150 years. But things change. And if the technology is there to make it better, to get the calls right, then I think it's worth considering. I think it's a little bit unfair to put all of this on umpires because I think the job is harder than it looks on balls and strikes. I think replay could be done better. There isn't replay on balls and strikes, obviously. I think replay could be done better, and I think there's the odd egregious call. There was one in the Sunday night game this week with Philadelphia and Atlanta where Alec Boehm clearly did not appear to touch home plate, but it was upheld even after review, and the Phillies won the game very controversially. But the idea is to get it right. The idea is also to keep the game moving at the same time. You got to find a balance, and if the technology is there, then I'm open to considering it.
Absolutely appreciate it. That was it, Dan. Thank you so much for taking time, guys. This is Dan Shulman, play-by-play of the Toronto Blue Jays on Sportsnet. You can catch them every time the Jays are in action here. Dan, thank you so much for your time, man. I know it's been crazy busy for you. We were talking kind of off camera a little bit about how slammed you have been with, all these podcasts and media outlets. So, thanks for giving us your time today.
My pleasure, Chris. Be well.
What a great professional he is. And you talked about the electronic balls and strikes. I mean, I have an opinion about that. What's your observations about if they implement that?
I'm all for it if they get it right. As I'd mentioned in my conversation with Dan, it was, yes, I don't want to see the personal, element of the game taken out, the human element of the game taken out, but at the same time, you got to get it right. And I know that they are testing it in certain markets and have been for a little bit to see how it's going to play out. But just like you, I mean, when I saw Rowdy Tellez gets, punched out, struck out, the ball was 3 inches below the strike zone. I mean, that's just not, he gets caught standing there looking at it. It's not fair. You got to get that right. So I'm all for it if it's going to perfect the game and get the calls right.
Yeah, I'm a little bit still on the other side. Not that I'm older than you.
You would be.
I sometimes get tired about the challenges at first base all the time. And the other night the game ended for the Blue Jays based on a challenge where a great stretch by Vladdy Guerrero on a throw from second, and it was out by a mile. And I don't know how he could have called it safe. I agree on those things, but balls and strikes, that's just the personality of the home plate umpire. And you get some, you don't get some. It all evens out in the end. So I don't like the balls and strikes. I don't mind the reviews at the bags, but not crazy about the balls and strikes.
Well, and again, just quickly, Jerry, I want to get your thoughts and opinions so far. It's still early in the season, but do you like the Jays so far?
Oh, yeah, they're fun to watch, and they look like they're having fun, which makes it fun for a fan. It looks like they really enjoy each other.
All right, so let's move on because the NHL trade deadline came and went, Jerry, and I want to get your thoughts and opinions. Who were the winners? Who were the losers? Was there anything that surprised you?
Toronto getting players for very little. They didn't give up a body out of their lineup. They get Foligno. I don't know if they're going to use Riley Nash or not, and if it was just a ploy to move money around. But Foligno's going to move in there very nicely. And the fact that they got the goaltender from Calgary, Riddick, is it? Here nor there. I think Campbell's the man. Anderson maybe has been the fly in the ointment for the Oilers on along. Maybe they couldn't pin it on Kadri anymore. They couldn't pin it on the defenseman they shipped off to Carolina. Nonetheless, I think they've done a good job. Have they done enough? I don't know. They got some good quality for very little payment. Who I did think was the biggest winner in my eyes, because I like David Savard. Tampa Bay just got stronger on the blue line. They got Hedman and Savard and all the other guys that go along with it. I think still Tampa's the team to beat as the defending champs.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because this was the reason the trade deadline was so interesting, because people knew with the cap the way it was, people were going to have to get creative with the deals. And David Savard is exactly what I mean when I say teams and GMs got creative. Columbus shipped him to Detroit, retaining 50% of the salary. Detroit then shipped him to Tampa, retaining 25% of his salary. So now Tampa gets Savard for 25% of the salary. Now, everybody who's if you're a Moncton Wildcat fan and have been for years, everybody knows who David Savard is. Wildcat MVP, probably one of my favorite defensemen the Wildcats ever seen come through the organization. What an absolute win that is for him to move to Tampa, Florida. You are right. They're the team to beat. Kucherov still hasn't played a game yet. But Taylor Hall going to Boston, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that was were you surprised by that?
Well, no, I think that might be the perfect fit for David Krejci. I think Krejci has been challenged. He's had DeBrusk on the wing, but now he's going to maybe have Hall on the other side. And I think that really legitimately gives him a solid, good second line. I think there's always been that third ingredient missing on a Krejci line, because David Krejci still has a tremendous amount of abilities, and they still need to take some pressure off that number one line. So I like both moves, getting Hall and maybe getting him on Krejci's line. My Winnipeg Jets, well, I think they were trying for David Savard, Chris, but they did make the big move by getting Pierre-Luc earlier, Dubois, I mean. So they were ahead of the curve, and I think they're still all right, but they did need a defenseman, of which they get Ben. I would have rather get Gudbranson from Ottawa, but they get Ben, and it's a veteran defenseman on the blue line.
What I love about Gudbranson, you think that's funny. Everybody talked about when Montreal traded for Gustafsson, and it was reported earlier that it was Gudbranson, and places were going crazy. And that's why I love social media. One spelling error and a trade goes berserk. So overall, that's exactly how things go that way. But yeah, no, you're right. The Pierre-Luc Dubois, Patrick Laine deal, still, what a huge deal that was. And because of, the quarantine crossing the border, yeah, that was going to affect what was taking place. But overall, a very effective NHL trade deadline. It wasn't as exciting as it was. We'll cover that off here coming up shortly in our wrap. But yeah, overall, I would say it's a pretty success. The team's got what they needed. So anyways, that being said, Gerry, I think it's time. I think it's time for the wrap.
Let's go to the wrap. Kraft Hockeyville, Chris, was awarded to a New Brunswick location.
Absolutely. Congratulations goes out to Elsie Pogtog. And, this is the 14th Kraft Hockeyville we have seen. I love it. The incentive's great. The arena needed an upgrade. I love the community support surrounding it. Overall, I can't say enough. Can't wait till next year. Congratulations to Elsie Pogtog. Big news. History was made at the Masters. Hideki Matsuyama, big winner. What do you think?
First, Jeff, he's going to be a superstar, or a god there in Japan. Matsuyama with the victory of which, Chris, if there was anybody that could have challenged him near the end there, I think maybe the nerves might have got to him because he had some bogeys coming in and nobody was able to challenge. But overall, I thought the final round was somewhat anticlimactic. There wasn't any of that drama at the end, but I enjoyed it immensely, and how different it is watching it in spring than in the fall. Speaking of, the fall now has risen. Looks like the Red Sox are on top of the East. What's going on?
Still too early to tell. Pitching's been great. The lineup's been amazing. I pegged them to be a 500 team. I will take this 8-3 start. And to close it off, Trade Center's come and gone. TSN, Sportsnet, they've done what they've had to do. Do you think the days are dead of all-day trade centers?
Well, I think the last two seasons have been duds, but unless the NHL steps in and maybe puts a moratorium on the announcement of trades for 2 weeks before the trade deadline, I think might make it interesting. Otherwise, it's a Boresville.
Well, you've heard it here first, guys. That's the wrap. It's another episode of Sports QuaranTV in the books. Stick around for next week, and we will see you then.